Would you define yourself as woke?
Um, that's a lot of left field. Literally.
It seems like it, but it's gonna make sense. We're
Yeah.
gonna
I
come
mean,
back. Okay.
I guess so. Probably. Yeah. I don't
Okay.
think
So you
I
believe in
wouldn't use the
like,
word woke, but I mean, obviously, I have far
mhm.
left political views. So
Right. So okay. So you believe in intersectionality.
I mean, you just need to bring up something from the other side, right? Like if a Nazi voted for, if a bunch of Nazis voted for like fucking, I don't know, for Donald Trump, right? It's like, oh, does that mean that only 40% of Nazis are like extremists? That's stupid, right? Obviously.
Believe in CRT, queer theory, all genders, all mostly social. Like,
yeah, yeah, sure, sure.
okay. Do you think the majority of Americans would align with those views or no?
No, probably not.
Do you think the no? Okay. Why do you think if the majority of Americans did not align with that view became so dominant, especially a few years ago in the media and on the internet?
Well, again, that perfectly aligns with my theory of like
Mm-hmm.
the internet and the media spaces being unrepresentative of the average person, right? That
Mm-hmm.
like the average person is not. I don't think the
Right, Econoboy thinks people are usually good faith. Fuck. Wait, hold on. Do you guys... Gosh, I feel like this needs to be brought up multiple times. Aren't Nazis typically the kinds of people who try to like insert themselves into like these kinds of movements? I remember someone brought up Sargon of Akkad, right? Sargon of Akkad is like the prime definition. He defines himself to be a classical liberal, except he's like one of the most far right people out there. He does not define himself to be a Nazi, but he certainly allows Nazis inside of his audience. Like, isn't that the prime example of someone who still fosters like radical like beliefs and enables them even though he himself doesn't ascribe to it, nor will he ever probably ascribe to it? Like, fuck me, dude. Like, and he doesn't even believe that either, right? I'm sure he doesn't unironically believe in like, oh, Jews are the people who are doing everything, right? But he certainly fosters a large amount of people who does that. Like, it literally is like the the pro Sargon argument. Yeah.
average person is well represented by
He just
individual
pretends to
media
be classical
spaces
liberal.
or
Sure, yeah, I know. I think he considers himself to be like a fucking European conservative now. But like, I think what I am referring to is that I'm referring to old Sargon. Yeah,
Sure.
individual like
which
online
is certainly
communities,
true.
right? And
And
so
I think
similarly
that
to how that's true with the average person, I think it's also true with the average person that calls themselves a socialist.
Right. So I agree. The average person does not fit into that genre being woke, but the wokeness definitely completely seemed to captivate the online left. It seemed to captivate a lot of the media, and it had such significant control that even when Bernie Sanders was running, I think it was in 2016 or 2015, that when a couple of random black women came up to interrupt him, instead of him or security escorting these people off, he
that
just
was a good
stood
one.
there with his arms down, looking down, and let these people steal the microphone from him, right?
Yeah, that was
Like,
crazy.
what does that have to do with
Because
anything?
it seems like your argument is there is some
No. Because it's starting to bleed into the mainstream sphere, right? Like this is the kind of stuff that's starting to bleed into the mainstream sphere. Because the thing is that like Econoboy is trying to look for he's trying to look for evidence, right? He's trying to look for evidence that this is actually a bigger deal than people are making out to believe or whatever, right? But the evidence is right in front of us if you just look deeply enough, right? It's right there. Fucking Bernie Sanders getting interrupted by black women, the whole unfuck America situation, the whole like, yeah, I don't know. It's just like so many fucking things, dude. Like, fuck me.
kind of large majority of people out there that are silent,
You don't understand. You have to let black women speak, okay? Black women, black queen, go queen.
that are going to control the socialist narrative. And if by your own view, woke was in the minority, and yet it had such a substantial impact that Bernie completely
We failed to
capitulated to it
unfuck
in that
America,
moment.
on God.
You had most of the Democrats raise their hand and say that they would give health care to illegal aliens, which is a complete capitulation of wokeness. You had so many schools, institutions dominated by wokeness. It seems strange to me that your argument is, well, socialism is going to be okay because the majority of socialists don't believe X, when majority of people, by what you're saying, didn't believe woke, and yet woke completely swept through all of our institutions, and they all kowtowed to it.
Well, so again, I don't think that
The Z unfuck America situation is actually the best argument for Destiny's side. Remember the woman who said she would infiltrate every movement they made to destroy it? Yeah, but then they're just gonna argue that it's a one-off example, and oh yeah, that's just one person. Oh, she was being hyperbolic. Like the usual like fucking deflections and shit like they would say, right? Like they will say, "Oh, that's just a one-off example. You can't come up with another example and whatever." Like, yeah, it's just so stupid.
The things that you described, like quote unquote, completely swept through our institutions. Now, I would agree that there's a lot of like there's like federal contracting standards where if you're like a woman-owned business, you get extra points on a like whether or not you're going to get a government contract or something like that, right? And I agree there's a lot of like individual schools or like college professors who would talk about CRT and stuff like that, right? But I don't think that clearly it wasn't the case that these like radical views on like gender equity or racial equity or things like that were extremely broadly adopted. Not only because Democrats have lost elections in that regard, but also because it's, I mean, like for instance, like we see right now, we see a lot of Democratic spaces that are kind of in reaction against that because they feel like it's been toxic to the party. But I would never, my theory of
because Kamala lost because she couldn't pivot away from this.
Well,
Because
I would never
say, no, I don't want to give transgender surgeries to illegal immigrants and criminals.
I don't want to get sidetracked on a debate about transgender. We're here to talk about socialism.
No,
right?
no.
Now,
this is the point. You're making your
argument. But Sitch, I understand the point. You're making the point that a minority of people can set the media narrative, and then people broadly can run with.
I mean, it's, fuck. We can also relate this to drama, right? Can't a small amount of Destiny anti-fans set the narrative for all Destiny anti-fans? And doesn't that eventually make it up to Hasan? Games within games, right? Dune, Part 2. Isn't it the case that, again, all right, that Queeman and Jay Stoke are basically saying stuff, right, including Pisco now, right? And then eventually that gets filtered up, and that's not a big amount of people. It's like a small group of people, right? But then they're dedicated enough to make this happen, right? And then eventually Hasan gets a hold of it and he propagates it to a much larger audience, right? We see it happen in real time. Infiltration works. That's why people do guerrilla warfare. That's why people do anything really, right? Fuck.
That as a wedge issue.
Yeah.
But that's, I mean, of course that's true, right? Like I don't think I would ever say anything different.
No,
like obviously
it's not that it's a wedge issue. It's that the minority of people who were the woke had such influence over the Democratic Party that right now people are having a conversation about why did they all bend over for these people when it hurt Kamala's electoral chances.
Well, so for instance, a lot of those positions that she staked out, was in the primary. That's where a lot of like the radical, like left-wing Kamala quotes come from. And that was when she was trying to capture a part of the base that she, perceived, I guess part of her lane was to get these like very progressive voters to vote for her, right? Now, we're not talking about, just to be clear, like views about transgender. Like I take it that, yeah, like the average person that calls themselves a socialist probably does have very progressive views on trans issues or something like that. Like I don't think I'd ever disagree with that, right? But what you guys are saying is like, okay, like based on that, you're saying, hey, we can ascribe essentially not every, but we can use this example of a fringe of the party being able to set the narrative for like in some sense a broad.
Because we are smarter than everyone. Okay, I have the one view that will decide all views.
Broader swath than they represent, and so then we can necessarily say that that's the case with these Marxist-Leninist creators who are now all of a sudden engendering this like deep sense of
Did anyone see me talk trans issue with Econoboy? Yeah, you are not beating the allegations of being obsessed with trans
anti-democracy and anti-democratic thinking in the broader like American socialist movement. And I just don't find that there's almost any like material concrete evidence for that. And the evidence that we do have, which I agree is imperfect, is just, to me, does not strongly point in the direction of, oh, like we have like a problem with like essentially millions of secret tankies in this country, right? That doesn't seem like a
except there is. If you combine all the far left college students across the country into one group, and you also include all the people who are out there doing pro-Palestine anti-imperialists, and then you also include all the people who are pro-Luigi Mangione, doesn't that make millions of people? Doesn't Hasan have more than 1 million subscribers? I'm just saying, okay?
I guess that'd be a question. Like, if this was true, like, do you think there are millions of tankies? Like, there's like,
yes,
because 5% of people call themselves a socialist, right? Like,
yeah.
So 5% of the adult population.
I'm skeptical of the 5% socialist number too. So.
Well, it's just like an aggregation of all the different polls where people ask their ideology, right? So, like, if 5% of the people call themselves a socialist, That's like about
Well, no, but
13 and a
sure,
half
sure,
million
sure. But
adults, right? And so, like, that's one thing in the conversation where I asked Wick, because he was basically making the same argument. It's like, Wick, are you making the claim that there's like 5 million people that believe in Marxist-Leninism in this?
God, I wish someone, I wish someone would just like double down and say yes, there is, because you can make an argument for it, because I think you can actually make an argument for it, right? Like I just don't get why. I just literally don't get why no one would stand on this. This is like something you can actually stand on. Yes, I actually do think there are at least 5 million Marxist-Leninists. Yes. Yes, there is.
Country?
Because guess what? Guess what? If about 1% of the US population is transgender and half of that transgender population are Marxist-Leninists, from my perspective, at the very least, yeah, that does mean that there are like 5 million Marxist-Leninists, like just by transgender population alone. Oh
Like, that's
my
absurd if
God.
you ask me.
I don't think there is now. I'm worried that there will be.
Like, you can make this argument. You can. I just don't get why no one makes this argument. You can actually make this argument. Fuck me, dude. It's just. All right, listen. If Destiny starts repeating this down the line, just know that Destiny got it from me. Okay, just know that. All right. If Destiny starts repeating, yes, there are at least 5 million, millions and millions of like Marxist-Leninists. Then just know that Destiny got that point from me. Okay. That's it.
I'm worried that the younger generations right now that do consume primarily their political content from social media, from
Is Destiny?
streamers,
I don't know.
seem to be radicalizing between far left communist and far right ethno nationalist or alt righters. That's unfortunately where it seems like the conversation is kind of heading at the moment. And to me, and first of all, I do appreciate, and I will thank you that you were able to articulate my point, because it seems like very often that there's a complete breakdown in the conversations about that. Because but where the disagreement is that I don't know how you can make this argument when we both agree that the majority of Americans were not woke. We both seem to agree that to some extent, a lot of woke stuff did have control over a large part of the conversation in the media, and that politicians had to bend over for it. And if all that woke stuff is now all those same people that were pushing all the woke stuff are now pushing all this Marxist-Leninism or communism, I don't understand why you would say so confidently that you don't think that that's going to be what takes over. That's what the problem is going to be.
Yeah. So, these are two different statements. So, if we're agreeing that there's not millions of Marxist-Leninists and that this broader, currently existing socialist movement is not like overwhelmingly a group of Tankies, then I'm glad to at least have that.
I agree with the first part of what you said, not the second part. I don't know the truth claim of the second part at all.
Well, the second,
I agree that majority of Americans are not Marxist-Leninists. I don't know if the majority of socialists are not Marxist-Leninists.
Well, but again, if the majority of socialists were Marxist-Leninists, then we're making the claim that something like 5 to 7 million Marxist-Leninists exist in this country, like an entire state of Illinois worth of Marxist-Leninists in this country, which I would find to be.
Yeah, but I said I don't know if I agree with that number. But if that's what it takes, you then say yes. Then I will say that that's the case.
Okay, well, I would encourage if you can agree with that, then I would just encourage people to look up ideological surveys of how people identify and go from there. And on your second point of, basically, in the future, I am worried that we are going to be in a world with millions of Tankies in this country because of the influence of online media figures. I'm agnostic on that.
We already live in that world. E-Cuckle Boy. Okay, we need to come with a better nickname for him. Okay, fuck.
And I've been open about that. It could be the case that when the average Gen Alpha person who maybe did grow up watching Hasan is 35 years old, that maybe we do have a problem with like a shitload of anti-democratic Tankies in this country. And what I've said is, I don't think under any circumstance those people should be invited into Democratic Party politics. I would fight their inclusion, and I would argue against them, and I would say over and over again that absolutely not. Call me a right winger if you want. Like, I guess I'm
Econocuck, enabler of Tankies. It's perfect.
on the right wing now, but we agree with that, right? I've said that multiple times during that debate with Destiny and Wick. And if I was debating Hasan, it would be a debate, right? Like, I wouldn't, it wouldn't be like, I'm sure we agree on some issues, but like, no, like, it would be a debate. It's like, dude, you need to more forcefully endorse Kamala Harris. There's a clear fucking correct choice here. Similar to you guys, like, we'd have a very similar conversation. Like, I thought it's crazy not to endorse Kamala Harris, and same thing I'd say with Hasan. And that's probably the debate that we would have.
Yeah, but what, dude? How is that not a deal breaker for you, right? Isn't like not endorsing Kamala Harris such a fucking red flag? Like, if Hasan didn't endorse Kamala Harris, I feel like that would be like the biggest like red flag that has ever red flag. No, like, isn't that just like such a massive red flag that someone isn't like, dude, fuck me, dude, and they're like trying to downplay and sayingwash like Hasan. Like, have you watched his debate with Ethan Klein? It was such a high profile debate. I think they must have watched it, right? Dude.
You know,
Yeah, but it's not all just about electoral politics. Like,
Right,
I assume you'd have substantial philosophical disagreements with Hasan. Not
yeah,
just
I don't.
about who would, you know,
Yeah,
who
I
votes
don't.
for
I'm
Kamala
saying the single biggest topic.
Hasan would bury you in a ditch, econocuck. Okay? Hasan would bury you in a ditch. He would, if he could. All right? He would dig a hole, make you dig the hole while he's holding the gun. All right, like in fucking at the end of Ecstasy of Gold, in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. All right, he would be the one holding the gun, and you would be the one holding the shovel. All right, he will be asking you to dig your own fucking grave. All right. They're not on your side. Why the fuck would you accept them in your movement when they won't even allow you to join their movement?
Would probably be electoral politics. But of course, if we had subsequent debates, we would have there'd be subsequent topics.
That's kind of the problem, though. To me, I have a very because I'm just to be clear, I'm not echoing the same conversation, the same point, or the same conversation you had with Destiny about the coalition for vote.
I mean, it's best as Hamas make guys dig their own graves. Yeah, you know what's the funniest part is that Hamas would probably like unironically kill Hasan as well. Like if Hasan ever went to Gaza and like he actually met like Hamas, like he would probably be trying to make an argument that he does like propaganda for them and he admires them as freedom fighters, but that's literally about it. It's just like
I'm more
he might get
concerned
killed though,
with
unironically
with socialist, the Hasan style socialism, or what I believe is the more toxic.
Just mainly because Hasan has fucked so many fucking porn stars and they think like that's like a grave sin or some shit, like 100%.
Form of socialism, and I think is the majority of socialists infiltrating more and more broadly into this country and taking control of things, exactly similar to the way woke stuff did. That's what I'm worried about. And yes, a lot of those people will vote for Kamala Harris because they view her as the lesser evil regarding, than Donald Trump or someone else. And you're saying that you're just kind of agnostic on it. It's like,
that's
okay,
not what I said, Sitch. I didn't say I was agnostic.
You said you're agnostic on the future about whether it would happen or not.
Yeah. So that's what I was agnostic to. Was I don't know if that'll happen. Right. I'm not sure. Obviously, if you asked me directly, do I have an opinion on whether or not that should or shouldn't happen, I would say strongly against, right? Like I'm not agnostic to that doomsday scenario that you're painting. Obviously, that would be bad.
No, I meant you're agnostic about the possibility.
I think Econocock at this point, like I think that he's just mentally incapable of understanding why people have an issue with this. Like he's just mentally incapable, right? I can't tell if it's like cognitive dissonance or maybe he got like kicked in the head as like a kid or something by his parents because they didn't love him enough or something, right? But I just feel as though like he's just completely cocked on this position. Like completely. He's just so stupid. Like he's just... God, yeah. They make videos of him as a hostage. Yeah, they would have like fucking Econocuck beheading videos. Fuck, dude, Dude, I can't tell. You know what? At this point, I can't tell if like Econoboy is like trolling or not, honestly. It's just like, I just like, at this point, I just think he's, fuck. He can't be trolling. He's so serious on this. Right? Like, he's actually like so like fucking for real on this, On God. Anyway.
Of it happened.
You're going way too hard on him, not gonna lie. Maybe. I do feel kind of bad because he seems like such a soft boy, alright? But I don't know. It's at this point, if you enter the public realm of discourse, I think at this point you're free game. I think you're free game at this point. If you're like entering the public realm of discourse, then yeah, I think anyone can say anything about you, whatever.
Not whether it happened.
Yeah, I'm just.
But really, you think I'm the one going to like, dude? I feel like I've gone this hard against literally everybody.
Saying I'm just saying that like in 10 years, or I guess I'm more describing like in 20 years. In 20 years, could I imagine a world where Hasan is like a mainstream political figure who is able to command the voice, who's basically like literally the Joe Rogan of the left or something like that? I could imagine that, right? How likely do I find that? I mean, I think it's probably, more unlikely than not. But to the extent that it is likely, Sitch, it sounds like we agree that we should fight.
I'm a hand wringer. You'll either ban me or get used to it. Okay. Then I'll ban you eventually, probably.
Against that, and we should debate Hasan, and we should try to ostracize him.
All right, so to be clear, you're going to be, it sounds like you're saying you're going to be the online socialist who says that all the other online socialists all suck. Is that kind of the position you're putting yourself in?
Sorry, say that again, Sitch. I didn't
You're
really
going to
understand.
be, you're kind of putting yourself in the position to be the online socialist who says all the other online socialists are all terrible and suck.
Well, following in the socialist tradition of disagreeing with other socialists, I guess so. I mean, even Marx said, he wrote a letter criticizing his own son-in-law because he thought that his own son-in-law was misinterpreting Marxism, and he said something to the effect of, "Look, if what he says is Marxism, then even I'm not a Marxist, right?" And so, there's a pretty long storied history of socialists basically saying you're not a real socialist, and I've had that myself. Obviously, not necessarily from you guys because you guys aren't socialists, but I've heard a lot of people tell that to me, and a lot of socialists have told that to me as well. So yeah, I mean, I guess maybe that'll happen. Like maybe I'll be like on an island one day, but
Okay.
right now there's a
So-
lot of democratic socialists who seem to
Mhm.
agree with most of my policy prescriptions. So
Right.
The question I have is the endpoint, because you were kind of vague on, you're talking about these sovereign wealth
Akon,
funds
Cholakian?
buying up
Okay.
various assets in the economy and them structured to compete against one another, all of the Federal Reserve. But if the final state of that is all of it is owned publicly by the government and the private institutions are sunsetted, then I think you could call that socialism.
okay,
Is that the end goal? Is that what you're articulating here as the end goal?
I think that my ideal, if I thought that the economy would be just fine and like things would chug along, like we get up to 75% and it's like, man, things are great, let's go to 80%. Oh, let's go, just all of a sudden it seems like we get to 100%. Then you would end up in a world where basically again that capital allocation process that happens today with these like asset management firms and these like big investors, that would still happen, but the firms that do that allocation and who ultimately have the ownership would be public entities instead of private ones.
Right. If the government owned 100% of the outstanding stock of a company, though, they would have, they would have all sorts of rights, the same way as activist investors have if they buy up all the shares of a company.
Well, they would. Well, yeah. Each individual holding corporation would have shareholder rights, but again, those holding corporations compete against each other and have different like competitive interests, right? So they all have, similar in our capitalist system, they all compete against each other with different investment strategies on how to maximize value. But obviously, not all of them are correct.
I understand your system, but in the system we have now, in order for Elon Musk to take Twitter private.
Listen, I know the screen has frozen because I'm playing Path of Exile in the meantime, okay? But there's literally nothing to see here, okay? It's like two fucking black bars and Econoboy, but who wants to see Econoboy move?
He had to buy up all the outstanding shares of Twitter. He had to buy 100% of them, right?
Well, he bought a
So
majority of the shares, not all of them, but I take your point.
Okay, so if the government buys a majority of the shares, obviously,
very triggering, okay? Fuck yourself.
usually it's 51%, right? 51% ownership stake has a controlling power.
Yeah, I mean, definitionally, sure, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you perceive that to be an issue at all, or how does your system deal with that? I think you did mention in the Substack that you realize that politics can come into play.
Yeah. So that's what. So
I don't think it's the GPU. I just don't think it's the GPU. It's something.
exactly.
about the
So
GPU.
the way that the way that I deal with that is by having distributed management, right? So you wouldn't have centrally planned management of any of these institutions. You'd have like 100 different public holding corporations all operating independently with different professional managers competing against each other. So to answer your question, like how do you get over the idea of like, oh, well, 51% of this company is owned by public institutions, like how do you avoid the government coming in and telling like publicly owned Walmart that they have to cut their prices in half or something like that? Well, none of these holding corporations have the incentive to do that because their stated goal is to maximize value against these other holding corporations, right? So they're not going to want to just like slash prices a shitload. And the way that you institute, a good governing institution for that is that you have strict standards for like who gets appointed to these boards, like essentially how the actual like management of this ownership is governed. Like you'd have a very rules-based process. It'd be very transparent. You'd have independent rating agencies, you'd have all hard budget caps. I'm sorry, no soft budget caps. You'd have hard budget caps, financial reporting standards. You'd have a rules basis for your returns and dividend policy. You try to spell all this stuff out, and I think if you did all that stuff, you would have what we see in the world. The best examples of public ownership. You would have pretty good and apolitical management of public wealth if we did that.
What is the purpose of this? You're basically recreating what we already have with private ownership. What is the purpose of doing all this to make it public?
True.
I mean, you're
So it's
massively
really
increasing the size of the government. Obviously, you're talking about hundreds of Federal Reserve type institutions where a lot of people have a problem with the Federal Reserve as just one institution.
Well, right. I mean, obviously we have these massive asset managers already, right? It's just that they're privately owned and not publicly owned. So I don't know that the concentration is like an inherent problem in my system. I think that to your point of like, why would you even do this if you're just creating the dynamics under capitalism? The thing is, I like the competitive dynamics. I like competition and creative destruction. The profit motive seems like a good thing for a lot of different things. Obviously, something we might agree that some things shouldn't be profit oriented, like the police and fire service and stuff like that. But for the most part, the profit motive and market competition is good. But the reason why it's good to have these entities be publicly owned is because instead of having all of the gains of all of that ownership and all of that wealth accumulation go into the hands of an extremely elite minority of people, 10% of people controlling 67% of the wealth of society, we would be able to engage in a system by which that wealth would be extremely horizontally owned. I think that if you include the public wealth of Norway, the top 10%, they go from owning a majority of wealth to only owning about a quarter. So that literally they in a relative sense, they own half as much.
By the way, I just want to say the Norway point is bad faith. The reason why it's bad faith is, again, I think Destiny pointed out that Norway has like big oil, like most of it is like just oil shares, right? Is because they have such oil, like it's because the government owns all the fucking oil, like supplies, reserves, or whatever. So obviously, it's like a completely bad faith like example, right? Like you're pointing towards something that is a niche example that only applies to that country, that does not apply to other countries, and they probably didn't even like get that based off of like your methods that you have said. Like, yeah. Anyway, it's just stupid. Like. And also, how many people start their businesses in fucking Norway? How many people start their businesses in fucking Sweden? How many people start their businesses? I'm sorry. Do you see all the startups starting their businesses in these Nordic countries, or do you see people making startups in Silicon Valley and in California? California, the 4th largest economy in the world. Did you know recently California beat out Japan? And did you know California is still pretty damn good to poor people, except for the homeless? But we forget about these. All right.
Much wealth, and they have half as much power by wealth in society. That's a good thing for a lot of different distributed reasons. But then the gains of that.
In Norway, major role in its economy, contributing significantly to GDP, government revenue, and export. Sure.
Wealth, all of those trillions of dollars of capital gains and capital income, dividend income, would now trickle down to everyone horizontally. And again, not just overwhelmingly that top 10%.
Then it wouldn't be trickling down, would it?
We'd be able to. It'd be something
Trickle
like
down where?
In an ideal world,
to your mouth. You swallowing that cum, buddy, Mr. Cumboy.
It'd be something like $3 to $5 trillion worth of capital income that would be going to the public at large. On the from basically just capital production.
And the politicians would be in charge of it. The politicians would be in charge of it, allocating those resources in the same way that they're doing now. Correct.
Yeah, you could do whatever you want with the money. I mean, the representatives, I think I have a view as to what we should do with the money most likely, but the Democratic government would vote on whatever, they could do anything with it.
It'd be the same exact political process, and we'd be wrangling over whether or not to fund PBS in the same way that we're doing now, even though we had more money at our disposal. None of that would change.
Well, Adam, obviously, number one, so if we had the world that I'm describing now, we'd have no budget deficit, and we'd have like an extra few $1 trillion to spare on whatever we wanted, right? So we could pay down our debt with that money. Politicians could then say, like, in a constraint-based way, because obviously you don't have infinite money, like, well, what do you want to do? Like, do we want to just, expand Medicaid, expand Medicare? Do we want to, like, have a UBI or something like that? To the extent that basically you're criticizing the fact that the government is in charge of fiscal policy, like that's how we currently operate under that world. Like, are you saying the government, we shouldn't have democratically run fiscal policy? Like, that sounds...
Well, I'm looking for how this solves the wealth problem. If the resources that are gained through this sovereign wealth fund are still allocated through some sort of political process.
So it solves the problem.
You'll still have the Democrats trying to pay off their winning coalitions, and you'll still have the Republicans trying to pay off their winning coalitions. You'll just have a bigger pie.
Do you believe in democracy?
Arguably.
Like, maybe do you believe in democracy?
Yes,
okay,
I do.
Then you shouldn't have this inherent skepticism of the democratic budgeting process. Like, I understand that obviously politicians can misuse money and politicians can misuse public assets. So that's completely internalized with my understanding of my thinking. I mean, that's clearly the case, right? And so unless you're arguing for basically a system where politicians have no control over the budget, well, yeah, you have to kind of eat some of that risk when you decide that the way that we're going to distribute public money is through democratically elected representatives. I have a lot of criticisms for how our democracy is set up. We should have a much more democratic system, not much less democratic system like we have now. But those are political questions, not necessarily economic ones.
Do you think the Trump administration has allocated resources fairly?
Adam, No, that has obviously not. But again, that's a political institution question, not an economic one. We're skipping around here. Now, if we want to say, hey, Econoboy, your economic
but you're saying this new system is going to it's going to flatten hierarchies. It's going to raise the standard of living for people. So I'm just asking about how those resources are going to be allocated, because nothing has changed in the way those resources are allocated. You're
Adam,
just changing the way resources
has changed. Everything's changed in the system, right? So, like, for instance, if we take Trump, right? Trump might say, hey, we're able to close our deficit and we have another couple of $1 trillion on top. So he might say, hey, we're going to do another tax cut. We're going to return that money directly to taxpayers, and we're going to run budget neutral, but we're going to give $2 trillion worth of stimulus to just taxpayers by cutting the income tax, right? Now, I might disagree with that on various moral and economic grounds, right? But that's not like a new criticism. Like, that's a criticism of like the fiscal state and how we manage money. And
yeah, isn't Trump like a direct fuck? As if we haven't had the USSR before. It's so stupid. Public from scratch and EU companies. Public from scratch US and EU companies less than 50 years old with 10 billion plus market cap. Yeah. What is that? High tech EU. Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Nordic model, guys. Whoa. Isn't that crazy? Wow. It's crazy how much innovation socialism drives, right? Look at all this like socialistic, amazing progress in technology and for the betterment of humanity and society at large. Whoa, look at how many jobs that they are like supplying. Whoa, that's crazy. Whoa, look at that, look at that. Oh my God, I think I can almost see IKEA and Spotify.
And maybe a Democrat comes into office and says, no, like, I want to raise taxes and I want to use that tax revenue to pay for an expansion of Medicaid or something like, So we have a similar like level of political, we have like similar political dynamics that are going on, but we have, number one, much more money to actually use that's not necessarily distortionary like a lot of our tax code. So to the extent that Trump argues for cutting taxes, like literally we have a more economically efficient system if we just use capital income rather than increasing taxes or relying on the taxes that we have now. That's number one. And then number two, the same exact systems by which Democrats would want to funding those systems with non-distortionary capital gains distributions, other than basically just raising the income tax or payroll taxes like Democrats historically have.
I think I can almost see IKEA was a banger lying. And dude, the only thing that IKEA has contributed to us, the United States, is their meatballs, okay? Is their mid as fuck meatballs, all right? They're not even better than our normal meatballs.
Advocate for, that's much better for the economy as well, right? So that the paradigm of our economy changes in a structural sense when it comes to allocating this money in this different way. And obviously, there's a lot more of it to go around. On the wealth point, it's just like in an accounting sense, it's true that wealth inequality decreases significantly when the public owns wealth and not private institutions, because, well, now the public owns $100 trillion worth of wealth and not just a bunch of private investors, right?
The public owns that wealth, but it's being distributed by the political process, so they don't own that wealth. In the same way, a private owner.
They do own it. Yeah, they can do whatever they want with it.
How do they access that wealth?
What would they?
I'm a citizen of the United States.
You seem to know a lot about economy. You should do it. Economy. He should call in.
United States. I have a stake in the sovereign wealth fund. How do I get my stake? I wait for my politician to get elected and give me a tax cut or give me some sort of public program. I hope that they're going to spend that money on healthcare instead of buying Greenland. I mean, how is that money allocated?
So you keep asking this question. I'm just giving you the same answer. The money's allocated by the democratic process. Now, if you're going to make the point of...
So I am waiting. I'm waiting for my politician to get elected and to give me my piece of the pie. It's comical. I want to go back to
Adam. Wait, no. I'm not gonna. You can't just get away with. You called me the smug, condescending one, and then you laugh and say that's comical to what I just said earlier today. When I feel like I explained this pretty well. To respond to your point, obviously, in an accounting sense, you can't withdraw that wealth directly because it's democratically managed wealth, right? So it's true that you have to.
What if I just own it on the old system?
Going to IKEA is a great test for a potential spouse versus going to the hospital for cherry and J stock, right?
Like I have shares of Apple and Apple gives a dividend.
As opposed.
What if you did own it on the old?
I just get my piece of the pie, right? I don't have to. It's not embedded in some sort of political process.
Adam,
but in your system, I can't buy Apple because Apple's all owned by the government.
The thing that makes ownership collective is that it's collectively owned, not individually owned.
I'm talking specifically.
You know what we call that in the free market economy? Stocks. We call that stocks. Yeah, stocks.